Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Generative Geek. Today we are going to talk about Langflow. Langflow is a web tool built in Python which allows you to build LangChain applications, LangChain LLM applications without writing a lot of code or in most cases no code, right? It gives you a lot of composable blocks like these which you can then use to build very interesting applications, right? I really loved LangChain. I have tried several tools, but Langflow is amazing. A lot of composable blocks are already available. And in today's episode, what we are going to build is this. We'll have like a fully working chatbot using which you can actually query a PDF. We'll also in the process take the PDF, build chunks of the PDF using a recursive character text splitter, then store those chunks in a Chroma DB instance, and then that Chroma DB instance will be queried to build the context for our chatbot, right? So let's just say, let me do a quick demo, right? How was Infosys uh, earnings this time, right? So my chatbot has a PDF, which is a transcript from Infosys, which is a publicly listed company, and it now shares Infosys earning for declined in revenue, and I can basically chat with this PDF using the context that comes back to me through this entire pipeline that we'll build. So this is the pipeline that we are going to build. And we'll go through the entire thing step by step. You will only be building these, we are not going to write a single line of code to build this, right? So let's get started. So we'll first go to langflow.org, and this is where you can see that the easiest way to create and share chatbots, AI-driven apps, and things like that. A wonderful tool, but we don't need to join the waitlist. We directly need to go to the GitHub link. So press the GitHub link. It will open a new window for you, and there, what we have to do is we have to follow their instructions of how to get started. So what they're asking us to do is they're saying, hey, you know what, you should have Python 3.10 or greater. Truth is, I tried with Python 3.12 and I was having some sort of challenges with the build. So I downgraded to Python 3.10, and I'm going to show you using Python 3.10. But my buddy, he tried with 3.12 and on his system it worked all right. So he was on a Windows, I was on a Mac. I don't know what the challenges were. I did not debug that much. But let's now get started. So I'll open my Visual Studio Code and we'll then create an environment, install Langflow, and get started from there. So I have my Visual Studio Code open. Now what I'm going to do is just create a new environment. Let me just first create a file called main.py, do a command shift P, Python create environment. I want to create a VN and I'll select Python 3.10, right? I have various interpreters available, but I'm going to select 3.10 here. So once I do that, it will create an environment for me. And now what I'll do is I'll open terminal. With the terminal open now, I will go back to the page, Langflow page, and install the latest release, right? There is a significant difference in the stable version and the pre-release version. I will be showing you the pre-release version demo. I found that to be more intuitive. So I'm going to use that, right? We'll type this in. It will take a lot of time because there are a lot of tons of dependencies. If you see, it's installing LangChain, it's doing something with psycop-g2, which is basically driver for Postgres. So I don't know what all is there inside. It's installing a ton of things. Let it install, and once the installation is done, I'll come back to you on how to run Langflow. So do this code along with me where you are installing things, and we'll get started from there. Okay, so the installation is all done. I'll just type in clear and clear the prompt. Now what we need to do is again come back to the GitHub page and says run Langflow with python-m Langflow run. I'll show you something that I learned in the process, right? So we'll just say python-m Langflow run. And when I do this, it's taking a little while. Hopefully it will work post this. It's saying starting Langflow. There are situations where when you type python-m Langflow run, you will end up with issues like these, right? So I was earlier having some certain issue where okay, so it's launching, the Langflow is launching, but let me just show you the issue I was landing in, right? So I was landing in issue something like, under underscore main under underscore something like that, where it was not able to find, produces error, things like that. I was getting this very same error that, Langflow is a package and cannot be directly executed. In fact, to this I even posted a comment some hours ago saying, if you're on a pre-release, just try typing Langflow run. So for me, on this installation, it has worked. But if, let's say, you land up in an issue, my recommendation is just type Langflow run instead of python-m Langflow run, and you should be able to run it. If you still don't are not able to run it, come back to this issue, type your comment, and I'll try to help you there, right? So now we go to this URL. The URL is already opened. We can see this is available here. This is where we are. Once you have this thing installed, Langflow installed, this will open up, right? So it's a beautiful UI. And from here, what we are going to do is we'll get started with creating new flows, right? So we are building flows, and flows are made up using components. So we are not building components here, we are building flows. You will get to understand each of these things in just a while. So I'll press start here, and when you press start here, you basically or let me just show you, if you do a new project, right, it gives you a very nice templatized way of getting started, that hey, what is it that you want to do? Do you want to start building a vector store RAG? You want to build a blog writer, some sort of a document QA? We'll start with a blank flow, right? And once you start with a blank flow, on your left you see all of these things, right? So there are inputs, outputs. If you look at inputs, there's a chat input, prompt, text input. For our use case, as you can see on the screen now, we'll first get started with, we'll first take the PDF, and we'll give this PDF to a component which is basically going to implement the recursive character text splitter. So it will chunk the PDF, right? So the PDF is going to get chunked, and then using OpenAI embeddings, we'll store these embeddings into Chroma DB. So basically, from PDF, our chunks are now saved in Chroma DB. Next, what we'll do is we'll have a chat prompt, and using the chat input tool, we are going to ask, user is going to ask a question. Whatever is the question, that becomes your question, right? So, and basis the question, we are then going to send a similarity, do a similarity search on Chroma DB, and get the most similar chunks out from it. This will become our context. We are now going to add the context and the question to the prompt, and maybe some history as well, that hey, whatever messages you have already exchanged, we'll add that as well, and we'll build a bigger prompt. That prompt will be sent to OpenAI, and whatever is the output, that output will be displayed both in the chat text box, as well as maybe I'll show you how other ways you can, what are the other ways you can display the output, right? So let's get started. This is exactly what we are going to build without writing a single line of code. So let me quickly make this slightly bigger. And on this, what you will see is there are a lot of components available on this left side, right? So all the things that you see on the left, they are all the components, right? So first thing we'll do is we'll bring in some sort of a file reader, because we need to take a PDF, and that PDF is then going to be chunked into smaller pieces, right? That's what we are going to do. So we have a file, and you can even select a file here. We'll do that in a while. And now what I want to do is I want to bring some sort of a text splitter, right? So I want to bring in some kind of a recursive, yeah, recursive character text splitter. And if you have seen my other videos where we actually had to code it by making a lot of imports, we had to specify the chunk size as a variable name and variable value and all of that. Here within this component, you get all of that, right? So there has to be an input. What are the separators? If you don't give a separator, it then defaults to something. We can say, hey, you know what, my chunk size has to be at least 2000, and the chunk overlap has to be 200, and you can, like, customize this component. So this is a component. It needs to take an input. So what we are going to do is, I want this file to be inputted to the recursive character text splitter, so that now these things are then the bigger file, right? Maybe this is like a, who knows, 40-page file, right? 40-page PDF, that will then be converted into smaller chunks, right? So that's what we are going to do now. Once this is done, the next step is, the load has happened, the chunking has happened. What you now want to do is you want to ingest them in a vector store, right? So the vector store that we are going to use is called Chroma. You would have seen other videos I have on Chroma. So we are going to make use of Chroma. And when you bring Chroma, earlier we had to do a pip install Chroma, we had to then import necessary libraries, we had to let the thing know what is the collection name, what embeddings we are going to use. Here, think of it, all of that is abstracted, all of that code is written, this component has that code. So we have to give the name of the collection in Chroma. If you have not done any Chroma video till now, is like the table name or the database name. Which database do you want to use? What is the name of the database where all of these chunks, basically the embeddings of the chunks, are going to get stored, right? So we'll say pdf underscore chat, and any collection in Chroma needs at least two things. One is the collection name, the other is the embedding, right? What embedding model do you want to use? What we are going to do here is, I'm now going to bring in an embedding model, right? So if you go embedding, you see there are like tons of other embeddings available. I'm going to use OpenAI embeddings, right? So we'll bring in this OpenAI embedding, and I'll just put it here. Now, when you use OpenAI embeddings, what you have to do is you have to first select what is the model name, right? So all of these models have different characteristics, different costs. I'm just going with the default for demonstration purposes. Next, I already have a global API variable. If you don't have a variable, you can create one. I can come here and say, hey, OpenAI underscore key, that's my variable, and it should be a credential, right? Here, you should now go out and paste whatever is your OpenAI key, right? Which you can get from platform.openai.com, right? So go to platform.openai.com, and you should be able to see you should be able to see your keys or generate new keys from here. You will have to obviously log in, and then you can do that, right? So it's fairly self-instructive. Just go there, you will be able to build a key for yourself. Next, once you have the key, paste the value here. I'm just going to pause this video here, paste my key, come back. So my key is now pasted, and I'm just going to save this variable, right? So I'm going to save this variable. Now I have OpenAI underscore key, which has the value of the key, right? And now what is going to happen is, using this key, it is going to make a call to this text embedding ADA002 model, and that's the embedding we are going to use. So I'm just going to connect this embedding with Chroma, and this way now we have a collection name, we have an embedding setup, we can persist this somewhere. So I can say Chroma underscore store or Chroma underscore DB. That's my directory where I want to store this. Once this is done, it also needs some input, right? So input in the sense, what is it that it is ingesting? Now, what it is ingesting is our chunks, right? So our chunks have to be ingested. So we'll bring the chunks from the recursive character text splitter and input them, bring them as an input for the Chroma component, right? I know this might be slightly harder to visualize or to look at, but that's the slight constraint with this drawing board kind of a setup, right? So what did we give? We gave it the persistence directory, we gave it some embedding model, and we brought in the OpenAI embeddings component, we gave it the key, and we connected all of them together. So we are at this point where we took a PDF, and we can even specify the PDF. We can say, hey, you know what is the PDF? So my PDF is Infi transcript. Infosys is a publicly traded company both on the NASDAQ and in India on the stock exchanges. This is one of their transcript from a conference call. I have just taken that. You can take any PDF for that matter. You can take a latest paper that has come out, maybe some other financial earnings, whatever is of interest to you, right? Maybe some book, and follow the same process. With this, we are now at a stage where our PDF was chunked, the chunks were embedded, and that embedding has now got ingested into Chroma DB. Now comes the part where we want to use this to build a chat agent with using which we can then chat with the PDF, right? So we'll now get started with building the chat part of it, right? So if you look at it on the left side, you have all of these components available, and I'm just going to bring all of them now, right? So the chat chat input I want to bring the prompt, I also want to bring the text input, right? And you will understand what we'll do with each of them shortly. The chat input is fairly standard. You know what it will be. It is about the user typing in some message and that becoming the input, right? So the next is your prompt. What I'll say is here you can actually define your prompt. So I want you to act like an expert uh, at reading context information and giving answers basis the context, right? You are provided with the following context, which is context. So we are saying you are provided with the context, give a new line, then you are provided with history, which is nothing but message history. So whatever chats are happening, we'll provide that as well, so that it has some state that it maintains. And you have a question, right? But whatever the user types in, that becomes our question, right? So and then I want to give it, I want to ask it the answer, and I want to give it one standard disclaimer saying, hey, do not make things up, use the context that is provided to answer the question, use the context and history that is provided to answer the question. If there is not enough information in the context and history, then let the user know, right? So this is what I have, this is the prompt that I have made. And once you save this, you can see that there are now 3 variables for us. So there is a context, there is a history, there is a question, right? So the question is simply put whatever is the chat input, right? That becomes my question. What about the context? Context will come from Chroma DB, right? So the Chroma DB thing that we just did will come back to the context in a while. What about the history, right? And now for history, what we need is some sort of memory. If you remember, I had done a very detailed video on how do you add memory to chatbots. This is that part, right? And but the simplified part of it, we covered several ways of adding memory in that video. But this is like, hey, how many messages do you want to, like, keep sending back as part of the prompt, right? I'll stick with the default. So we need to send back 5 messages. So every time there are 5 messages, this is like a rolling window. 5 latest messages are going to get sent. You want to select just the machine and the user, or only the machine. I'll let it be like, the machine and the user, so that the machine has, when the AI is looking at the entire thing, it has enough information about what we were talking about, right? So then there is something called as a session ID. Now session ID is, if you look at the info, this is the session ID of the chat history. So these states are maintained at there is some sort of an identifier to the state. And what we can do is, whatever is the text input we are giving here, we can let that be basically the we can say ID, and whatever ID we enter here, that becomes the session ID, right? So that becomes the session ID for this user, right? So sender name is user, or you can even say, I can even bring another text input, and we can say, hey, we'll inform the bot about what is our name, right? So the text input is username. So we have now like, we have 2 inputs. So the one input is about the username. What is the name of the user who is chatting with the bot? That becomes your sender name. And the second is where we are giving it some sort of an ID, and that ID becomes the chat memory. I could have just used both of them as same. I could have just brought this thing here, and that also is valid, right? So it only accepts one input. So maybe not one input, even this can be brought here, right? So why confuse things? We can say, hey, whatever is your name, that becomes the session ID, and that also becomes the sender name, right? So this way we can connect things up. So it's a simple drag and drop connect kind of a setup. So now what we have is, we have our chat input. So we have connected, and now whatever is the memory, we'll connect that with history, right? So this becomes my history. Now I need to get to the point where we'll have context coming in. So for context, I need to bring in Chroma again. So we'll say Chroma, and you can see earlier we took the Chroma Vector Store. Now I'm bringing in Chroma Vector Search, right? Because now we are searching whatever is the user typing. I'm searching that, right? So So this becomes my Chroma search. And you need to, again, let's just go back up for a minute and see what was it when we were ingesting things. We had the collection name as PDF chat, and our persistent directory was Chroma underscore DB. We have to use the same things here now. When we are now again going to search back from the database, I have to search in the same database and I have to search in the same directory. I can't have search somewhere else. So let's set this up. So our collection name is called PDF underscore chat. And our index directory was Chroma underscore DB is our persistent directory. So that becomes our index directory now. And the input is basically whatever the user types, that becomes the input, because that's whatever is the user typing in, that is now the question, right? So that is basis which the search has to be done. So I'm just bringing this here. Sorry, this might not look too intuitive, but this is how it is. Yeah? So if you look at it, there was a chat input. Whatever is the user typing here, whatever message, that message we are taking in and making it as a question, and also using that message to search in Chroma, right? So if the user types in how much revenue did Infosys do in the last quarter, what is going to happen behind the scene is that message, that input is going to be embedded, and in this collection and in this directory, it is now going to search for most similar results. So I'm going to say search type as similarity, right? It is going to pick whatever is most similar and it is going to give that output to us. So now I have to also connect embedding, because and you have to be always sure that when you ingest, whatever embedding you use, the same embedding you have to use here, whatever same model, and the same model has to be used. I can launch another kind of component, but I'm bringing in the same component just to show you that the same component can be connected again and again, right? So this way our Chroma search is ready now. If you see, my embedding is connected with the same OpenAI embedding that we have above, which we were using when we were ingesting. I have brought in the same output here. Now, what I'm doing is I have everything connected, right? So the result now becomes my context. So I'll pick the result, come back into the prompt and connect it with the context, right? So if you look at it, this is how it looks now, right? My context is connected with Chroma search. My history is connected with chat memory, and my question is connected with chat input, right? So with this, now my prompt is complete. Now this prompt has to be sent to OpenAI. So let's just search for OpenAI, and I have this model here, which is OpenAI. I'm going to bring it here. We need to give it the key. You can select what model you want to interact with. We'll let it be GPT-4o. You can say GPT 3.5 Turbo. I'm just going to stick with GPT-4o, and we're going to say OpenAI key. What should the temperature be? Temperature will define how much creative you want the model to become. I don't want it to become too creative at this point. And the input for us is just the prompt template, right? Whatever template we had, we're giving that as an input. Next, what I want to do is I want to show this output somewhere. Whatever the model will output, I want that output to be shown. So we'll go to outputs, and we'll say chat output, right? So I want the chat output to be done. And you just connect, sender name is AI, and you just connect it with the message, right? So that's what, this is how you connect. And this way, if you look at it, my entire thing is now ready, right? So we started with the file. We took a file, we brought it to the recursive character text splitter. We said 2000 is the chunk size, and then you have an OpenAI embeddings that we used, and we sent those embeddings to Chroma DB. Next, we brought in the entire chat thing, where we said, hey, what is the username? And we use that username as both the sender name and the session ID for the history. We are going to use 5 messages from the history. Then we built a prompt template where we said this is going to be our prompt. And when we declared these variables, we saw that automatically 3 new variables came up for connections, right? So we could connect these variables here. You can have even more detailed prompt template where you can have tons of variables, and those tons of things will start showing up here. Next, we took this output. sent it to OpenAI, and whatever came back from OpenAI, we then pasted here as chat output, right? Now let's just try this entire thing out. So once you are ready, we'll press the playground button, and we have to enter the username. So I'll say Generative Geek. This becomes my ID now, if you remember, and we'll just say, how is Infosys looking at the entire generative AI landscape and the opportunities uh, it brings, right? So basically, Infosys is an IT services company, and there is not information in the provided context and message history to answer the question about how Infosys is looking at the entire landscape and the opportunities it brings. Now, one thing that we can do is, in case if let's just say, let's type another thing. What is the future? Uh, Share some mega deals, some deal wins, right? From they talked about. Share some deal wins they talked about. Let's see what the model comes back with. We have asked the model to specifically output only from the context. So if let's say there is not enough information in the context, it will not talk about that. Based on the provided context and history, here are some details. The company reported very strong wins amounting to $3.2 billion, 71%, and all of that, right? So 71% of the 3.2 in deal wins, these various SAP and all of that. So you can see, right? This way your chatbot is now ready. What we can even do is, just from a debugging perspective, right? If you are interested, there is this context that comes back. We can even have it outputted in some sort of a text output, right? So I can have some sort of a text output which will display what is the context that is getting fetched and getting passed into the prompt template. Or I can even have the entire prompt template. Why only the context? I can even have the entire prompt template displayed, right? So instead of this, maybe I'll connect the entire prompt template into a text output, right? So let's see. Now with this connection, let's turn the thing again, and you see an output coming up here, right? So this is empty for now. I have Generative Geek here, which is basically now 5 last messages should be part of it. Is there any update from the retail sector, right? So I'm just making things up and asking it. I have not read the PDF myself, but I know that as an IT services company, they probably have a lot of clients in various sectors. Messages say there is no specific update or information regarding the discussion. Primarily revolves around overall demand environment, client spending behavior, digital transformation programs, cost efficiency, but doesn't mention retail sector specifically, right? Now let's look at the output, right? So if you look at it, I want you to act like an expert at reading context information. And if you look at it, this is what the context is, /n context, external document. It is better now. Please go ahead. So this is what it is fetching. And this is the context. Still at the context, I don't see. Okay, there is questions. I don't see history, right? So the history part doesn't seem to be showing up. And why is it so? So good. Now when you start looking at it, it makes sense for us to now go back to it and ask and check why is the history not showing up, right? So let's again see what was it that we did. We had the history come up from here. This was the chat memory. Retrieve stored chat messages given a specific session ID, and the session ID was our text, right? So whatever value we gave, that was the history. Let's again try it out. I'll just change the input now. So I'll say, instead of Generative Geek, change the ID, because the ID now changes. That means um, how are you? How is Infosys looking at margin enhancement? Right. So we are trying to debug why we did not see the output last time. So we did not see anything on message history. Okay, I can see the message history show up. Let me just copy this and bring it onto some sort of a maybe my I'll just close this here, and we can look at history, right? So if you look at it, the history now has it's still blank, right? The message history is still blank because this is probably the first message. Let's try more. Let's see what comes back after I type. Uh, so it gave us some output on utilization, internal programs. Is there more info on pricing and value-based selling, right? So let's just ask it some question, right? So I'm more keen on understanding if the history has any data or not, right? So how is Infosys? Okay. So now let me just go back to the text output, copy this again, and come back to my thing, paste this, and see if history, yeah. So history now has, is there more info on history is still coming blank, and that's slightly surprising. So this means we are not sending any history, right? So we are only sending the context, and we are sending the question, but we are not sending any history. So okay, I'll give this thing some debug and see why we are not sending any history. Maybe instead of this, have another text output just on the history and see why is the history not showing up, right? It's slightly surprising. History should have shown up. Now I'm just connected another text output to history just to see, right? So we see now two outputs. I'll maybe change the name here and say this is history so that I know. So you see this is history now, and this is empty for now. So let's just type, uh, tell me about specific clients and segments, right? So I'm just trying to debug. I'll just not take too much of your time. Maybe the last of the sessions on how to debug. So we'll go to the outputs, we'll see history, nothing comes out. It's empty, and which is surprising, right? So okay, maybe because this says this is still in beta, maybe there is some error with the component itself. Or let's just say if I only want to send the user, does it change anything, right? So hi, right? So I just want to see if history has anything or not. uh, so far nothing, the history thing seems blank, and no, right? I'm just typing something just to see if history has anything, because history ideally should have something going back, but no, I don't see, still don't see anything going into the history. So we'll leave it at this. This is what we built today. Maybe the history part did not go out that well, but other than the history, so this is a stateless bot right now. And if there is any other memory, no, there's only chat memory, right? So if instead of having a memory, this is like a stateless bot which we built. We took a file, we ingested the file. Sorry, this is like, it gets messy. So we took a file, we chunked the file, we use OpenAI embeddings, embedded them into Chroma DB, and then we came back and we built the entire chat workflow, right? So we could have done now the way it is, even if you don't have the chat memory block, it will still work fine, right? So this is what we built. I hope you learned something new. Please share your comments in the comment box and let me know how it went for you.